Hi, I'm Dave Sobel, host of the Business of Tech podcast here at the Acronis CyberFit Summit in Miami, talking with Jay McBain of Forrester. Jay, welcome. Thanks for coming out.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is fantastic.
So I'll start with some high-level numbers, because I know you always like to start there. What are you seeing in the security landscape that your average solution provider needs to know?
Well, I'm starting to see some big changes in numbers. A couple of years ago, we saw that 73% of MSPs saw security as the tip of the spear. That's the place we need to go. The pandemic hits, we're at 99%. It's in everyone's conversation. One of the tricks, though, is there's 4,600 security companies. So they're trying to manage this noise and clutter right now. 2,000 of them, by the way, have channel programs, a channel chief, and now channel software, like portals. So there's this absolute clutter in the market, and there's 17 layers of security, and MSPs are trying to figure out what the portfolio is and how they go forward.
So do you think that number is going to get smaller, bigger over the next, say, 2 years or so?
It's going to get bigger. I went on record a little while ago saying there's going to be 1 million software companies. And today there's 175,000. And when you look at the next 825,000 companies, they are looking at the crossroads of different kinds of buyers, different sub-industries, different geographies, different sectors and segments of the market. They're looking at all the different security technology. They are building, not large security companies, but they're building very, maybe only 100 to 200 customer type focused companies around security. That last mile, to use a telco term.
Right.
And so this number is going to get much bigger. It's going to double within the next 5 years.
So while we're here, Acronis has released some new research around MSPs, and they're talking about the drive towards consolidation on the MSP's perspective. They're trying to get that number of vendors down. Do you see those two forces in conflict, with more supply on the one side, but MSPs choosing potentially to be less demanding?
Well, there's an interesting dynamic going on, and you've been talking about this for a long time. There's a little bit of a ceiling price in the market for MSP services. And you might be delivering 20 different things. You're delivering continuity through Acronis, you're delivering security through Acronis, but you're also doing the help desk, and you're doing some networking, and you're obviously managing and doing the break fix on the PC. There's a lot of stuff going on. So in that market, for many MSPs, it's pretty consolidated and highly price compressed. So they're looking at the most efficient way that they can serve security within that ceiling price, but also gate what they do. You're not going to layer in 7 and 17 layers of security and fully lock down your customer for $113 a month, plus all the other stuff you're doing. So what are you doing at the edge? What are you doing in email? What are you doing perhaps in some basic firewall? What are you doing in basic antivirus? And then being able to step your customer out of that conversation into what more of the MSSP conversation. So we knew that 73% of MSPs now are actually on this road to becoming an MSSP. And now you're into a different conversation with a customer that says, there's your 113. Now for $50 more a month, this is actually what protection looks like. And we heard that this morning about physical security, into the network security, application security, web security, obviously everything at the edge, the zero trust models. You don't do that inside the contract you already have. And that's where I see the big trend right now and going into 2022, is MSPs asking these really, really good questions.
So I love that, and I'm going to latch onto that zero trust thing, and I'm going to posit a bit of a theory, and you tell me your take on it. So I would posit that over the next 12, 18 months, 24 months, there's going to be a conversion to focus more on SaaS management and zero trust security, and de-emphasize the endpoint for leading MSPs, because they know they've only got so many resources to deploy on behalf of the customer, and protecting the crown jewels in the cloud is more important. What's your take on that?
I would actually disagree. Okay. It's security is something that's going to run in parallel, and we've got a new future of work. 30% of people are looking at work now as what they do, not where they go. So it's not locking down cubicles anymore and locking down, with the actual front door with some badge. You've got this decentralized, highly distributed remote topology now that you're managing. And now you're managing external threats and obviously the internal threats. Most internal threats, so most internal employees are looking at SaaS. Whatever line of business they're in, HR, marketing, sales, operations, finance, they're actually leading the way. 65% of SaaS is bought by lines of business. And that's traditionally where MSPs haven't been that strong. They've been servicing IT, CIOs, CTOs, CDOs, and now CISOs. But now you're out when this head of marketing spends more money on technology than the head of technology. You start to look at the 8,000 different MarTech technologies they're putting in place, and all of the customer data and internal data that's flying through these public clouds. There's a huge issue there. There's a big exposure, and maybe the digital agency and others that are in those conversations don't have the security chops to dig inside zero trust and start to figure out the parameters and everything else. But that doesn't stop the work that's going on the federal government level, which is kind of the IT level. And that doesn't stop the other layers of the stack as well. So I think when you become an MSP into an MSSP, you're actually talking almost in 7 lanes of traffic. And you're basically talking to every functional leader at the organization. When you're in front of IT, you're having the broader conversation. When you're in front of these line of business buyers, who, by the way, are spending 51% of their time now on tech, you're now introducing this security conversation to them, maybe for the first time.
So, if you're competing for those dollars from these business leaders as opposed to the traditional IT buyers, is this where ecosystems and marketplaces come into play? This is obviously something you talk about a lot. Is that a competitor? Is that an opportunity? How should your solution provider think about that play?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is to decouple how the money's going to change hands. By the end of this decade, I'm pretty convinced that a third of this industry is going to be resell, a third of it's going to be marketplace, and a third of it's going to be direct. But to most service providers, that doesn't matter. The transfer money is less important than the value we're providing. So when we get into the second conversation, marketplaces grew more in 3 months last year than the last 10 years combined. But when you talk to line of business buyers, when I talked about those 8,000 marketing solutions, the average buyer on a Salesforce App Exchange or a HubSpot or these different marketplaces are buying 6 other things on top. They already have the psychology and the behavior of understanding that there's this last mile. And not only are they buying another $1 of software on top of the $1 they're buying of the base platform, they're spending another $5 in downstream services. And a big piece of that is becoming security. So they're open to adding to that stack and adding security right in. That's the way the money changes hands. But they're looking for providers that can come in and step right into protecting them, and protecting their organization as they, go all in.
Well, follow the money is always good advice. So sort of last question. So you're a guy who spends a ton of time tracking trends. I do the same. What's the sort of dark horse thing that you're keeping an eye on that you think may be under the radar of most providers at this point?
Yeah, I do the David Letterman top 10 list every year of kind of all these converging things. I think a dark horse is everything going to subscription and consumption. Accenture went and asked every CEO in every company of every size in every country of every industry in the world. 76% of them think that their business model will be unrecognizable in 5 years, and ecosystems are the number one reason why. So everyone who sells you a toothbrush, a light bulb, a piece of software, security, is thinking consumption models. You've seen the growth in the pandemic of product-led growth. You've seen usage-based and value-based. You've seen subscription-based and consumption-based, and this explosive growth of marketplaces. So if you're going to follow the money, you've got to follow where the dollars changes hands, but 90% of this entire industry will be partner-assisted. And that's the conversation, because that's where the 75% margins are, not the 10 or 20% margins in resale. And that's the dark horse here, is getting into this model of giving up the actual resell of the technology if the customer wants to go to a marketplace or they buy into a product-led growth model like Zoom or Slack, and understanding that there's $5 more that go with every one of those dollars at 75% margin. Once you get into that conversation and build those skills, build those practices, build the confidence in sales and marketing to go ask for those dollars, that's the future, that's the decade of the MSP.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about. Jay, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you.